You're listening to the Real Estate Runway Podcast, powered by Quattro Capital, where we are all about alternative business and investment strategies to help you amplify life and maximize wealth. Here's your host, the recovering engineer turned multifamily investor, Chad Sutton.
All right, Real Estate Runway family. Today, we're going to have a very special guest, Dustin Serviss, on the show with Serviss Wealth. And he's got a unique perspective on how close living out your dreams really are and how you can numerically get there using something he calls the spending accelerator. So let's get right into that episode. But before we do, if you get any value out of this show, please leave us that 5-star review and thoughtful comment, or like us on YouTube. Those ratings are the only way to grow the show and reach more people just like you. If you want to apply to be on the show, please visit us at thequattroway.com/podcast. And if you want to reach out to us over email, podcast@thequattroway.com. We'd love to hear from you. Topic requests, feedback, or just say hi. And we are on all the socials, Team Quattro Capital, one word, no special characters, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, you name it. Love to have a conversation with you there. Without further ado, let's get right into the episode. All right. Real Estate Runway family, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Runway Podcast. I'm joined today with my friend Dustin Serviss. He is the Canadian in the room today. You're going to hear that I am not the Canadian with my accent. So welcome, Dustin, to the show. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, Chad. Thanks a lot for having me on the show today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you being here. So before we get going, do me a favor and walk us through a little bit of your story and what got you to the value creator that you are today. Tell me about who Dustin is first.
Sure, Chad. Thanks for the question. I think for many people listening, they're probably entrepreneurial. They're probably into real estate, and that attracts a certain person who's a go-getter and a hard worker. So listener, if that's, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I grew up, my father traveled 180 days a year. And that's what I grew up as a kid. And I thought, okay, well, obviously, if you want to be successful in life, you got to work hard. I didn't know how hard, so I just worked really effing hard and just went for it. And in my 20s, that worked okay. Into my 30s, it was all right. And late 30s, trying to have children, wife, keeping her happy, keeping myself happy, and really questioning, is this the next 25 years? You're working 6 days a week. And that led, there's a series of events, maybe we'll get into it, but really starting to ask myself, is there a better way? Is there a way that I could design my own life? For a long time, I've been 18, 19 years managing the wealth of high net worth families in Canada, mostly Western Canada. And so in seeing how they built their wealth and looking at my top 10 clients saying, okay, who do I want to emulate? Who do I really think is someone I want to be like? And if you think, listener, of the 5 closest, say, rich people and the 5 wealthiest people, are they the same list of people? And when you look and you say, oh, well, rich in money, okay, and then rich in wealth, well, then when you explore what is wealth, is it, well, I think they're wealthy because they're really philanthropic, or they're really spend a lot of time doing their passions, or you answer the question. But for me, that was a big thing. You mentioned it. We birthed, or I sort of presented to myself, this model called the spending accelerator, which I hope we have time to get into, because it is a way for someone to live more of their life now, yet be financially responsible for their future.
I'm really excited that you brought that up, Dustin. And I think we are going to go right into that, honestly, because if you follow any of the Quattro partners, we're not just about business and investing and making money, which is all important. You need money. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it does pay for the things you want to do that make you happy, right? And so we enjoy that side of things. But you hear Maurice, you hear me, you hear Aaron, every one of the Quattro partners talks a lot about lifestyle design. And I'm recording this in my beautifully designed home office where I like to spend time. And just before this, I was outside in the backyard throwing Frisbee with the dog, getting some fresh air. You have to be able to do the things that you love to truly be wealthy. Being rich, I've seen some really poor rich people out when it comes to just spiritual and mental health. So let's go right into that, Dustin. I'm glad that you teed that up. I want to go right there, and I want to camp there, and I want to hear about this thing that you birthed and how it helps you and how it helps others.
Sure. So one, just because you mentioned your yard, I'll share this, and hopefully it's not too crazy. And the ice just came off the lake. So this is a lake out in the Shuswap. So we got a beautiful, we're in the forest. And why do I share that with you? On my goal sheet from 2010 till about 2020, I wrote own an acreage. And in our hometown, Kelowna, British Columbia, the average house price is about 1.2 million. And the thought of owning an acreage is a big dream. So that wasn't going to happen. Well, I didn't think that was going to happen. So during the pandemic, how we started rejigging our life or sort of using this spending accelerator is we started looking at what are some of the life goals we have. We got 2 young children. What would be amazing? What would be amazing? My wife and I both grew up on farms and acreages, and this would be great. Well, we could move an hour and a half from our hometown, and we could have the same mortgage that we had at our same house in Kelowna, and we could own an acreage. Now, again, why I'm sharing that story is it leads into to change your lifestyle or to change the direction of your life or to change sort of your desired outcomes. There is no email that comes in on a Thursday and says, congratulations, you're approved. You can change your lifestyle now. You're now financially set, or your life's, all the things are in line. The ducks will never be in a row. So it takes basically looking at a bit of the risk and saying, okay, my risk, I'm in the wealth management business, wealthy clients, wow, leaving your hometown, not having a physical office for them to come to, this is going to be bad. All my business is going to zero, is what I thought. And when I actually thought about it and thought about COVID happening and we're doing Zoom meetings, and I was at peace with, I can actually realize this goal that I've had. I don't think I'm actually going to lose all my clients, but if they don't like me because I've moved and I'm not available every day to walk into my office, which they never did, then I'm okay with that. I'll be an excavator driver and run the sticks and run an excavator. And so that, again, whether that was the right timing, I just share that story because I share it with clients that there is never the right time. My kids had friends there, all that kind of stuff. I have friends there, but this was a goal. And so for an hour and a half drive once a week, I drive back to Kelowna. I make it happen. I go to meetings. I go to Zoom. Sometimes I'll go there twice, but it's worth it to me because of the lifestyle that we get to live. So for some of my clients, that's own a yacht and live on the yacht. Well, that sounds like a really fancy lifestyle. You can actually do that with reasonable money. It isn't something that's out of the question for a lot of people. It usually is the limiting belief in someone's own mind about the idea that they want to do.
That's great. And Dustin, just to take a little interjection there real quick, folks, if you missed that amazing view that Dustin spun around and showed you a few minutes ago because you're listening to this on the podcast side of things, this is a great opportunity for you to go to YouTube and type in Real Estate Runway, hit and subscribe, and look at this video with Dustin Serviss, because you will see that beautiful view that he just showed, and you'll discover the new YouTube channel that we have out there where all this video is published. But yeah, coming back to the show, I love what you said there. It's truly, we think in our minds, oh, I could never have that. I could never drive that car if that's what you want. I could never own a plane. I could never own an acreage. I could never live on the beach 12 months out of the year. The fact is, and my partner Maurice talks about this all the time on LinkedIn, folks, financial freedom, it does not mean you're the wealthiest or richest person in the room. All it means is whatever you choose to have as your living expenses is covered by whatever assets you own. And similarly, taking that over to what Dustin is saying is you may not have to achieve the world before you have the ability to realize your dream. And so take us through a little bit more of what is the tactical nature of it. So we have, this was the theory, and maybe there's more theory we need to go to. So if there is, please take me there. But yeah, go ahead.
No, I think you're on the right track of when someone actually unpacks it. Why do they actually want real estate? Why do they actually want to build up a big stock portfolio? Why do they want a big income? It usually has to do with because they want some sort of vehicle to fund them to live a certain program. And the acronym that we use is called BAM. So BAM, bare ass minimum. And what the bare ass minimum is, the minimum expenses that exist for you to exist. And that's not the travel and the fancy spending or the whatever your vice is. That just is like the mortgage payment, the rent payment, the car payment, kids' costs, groceries. Once you figure out that, and you, again, getting really into the weeds, my wife and I every September will print 3 months of visa statements, bank statements. We have a joint checking account. We have our own visas and we'll print them. It's a safe environment to share where the money's going. And it's not to point fingers. We both have been together for long enough that we know where the money's going. But I usually realize that I spend more than I think on snowmobiling, and she realizes that she spends more on places that she didn't realize. And it isn't to say you've got to stop spending there. It's more to just get awareness that, hey, my values, when I look at my own financial plan, it has to do with values. What are things I value? And then that helps me understand where I'm spending. So one of the things I value is being outside, being in the wilderness, being in adventures, being in challenging environments, being with, you guys laugh, but being with the bros. That's important to me. That's always been important to me. I've got 2 sons. It's important to me to still continue that on and understand what that's like. Well, snowmobiling, quadding, anything backcountry related, that's important to me. So when I see the spending going there in the winter times for snowmobiling, that just is a check mark. And it becomes part of that likely is not going to change. I'm now aware either I'm spending a little bit more than I think or not, but also spouses that can talk about money together or understand where the money's going are I'll say a lot stronger than spouses who don't. And there's all sorts of studies which you can up on it, but divorce is the number one killer of wealth for sure. But so my wife and I talk about it. It's a safe environment so we can get it out in the open. We understand our BAM. I understand where I can turn the BAM off. If we're in dire need, economy crashes, whatever, my business slows down, I don't need to snowmobile 25 times. I can go hiking for a lot cheaper. Okay, so we've got buffer budget there. But ultimately, once BAM, then you can start building backwards and building the assets. You might think that listen to whatever real estate guru out there, and they say you need a 32-unit apartment building is what you got to start with. I was like, well, that does make sense economically, but realistically, I'll tell you a story. My mother-in-law, she had a farm with a house and 2 houses on it and a mobile. And so she rented those out. Well, pretty simple program. They lived a great life. She was able to give money to grandkids and everything. But the rent of all those things and the farm being paid off was more than enough for them to live. They were happy. They didn't have to work. So it's all relative to sort of what you bathe your mind in as an expectation. If you're constantly looking at Instagram and seeing people you're only seeing whether they own stuff or not, you're seeing fancy, you're thinking, well, that's what I need. I obviously need big real estate. You might not. You might just need to understand where you sort of are in your spending and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that's incredible. I really love that. BAM, bare ass minimum, right? It's just having an understanding of what does it take for you to live. And going back to the financial freedom concept, right? That is, what do you have to have your assets cover? And to Dustin's point, and we do large apartment buildings and things of that sort, right? But that is not to say that's the only way for you to get there. If all you need, let's just throw a number out. If all you need is $2,500 a month to live perfectly happy and you're a modest individual, you could probably get there with a couple of single family homes or whatever. There's so many other assets out there. We're on Real Estate Runway, so I'm talking about real estate. Could be a stock portfolio, could be some mutual funds or whatever it is that gets you there. But that's so interesting. And I'd love to hear maybe an anecdote of how that goes, but talking about basically having the trust in your spouse to say, okay, and even if you have a joint account, let's print out our statements and my wife and I do this in a different way. We aggregate everything to a spreadsheet because I'm a tech nerd that way. But we look at things that way on a weekly basis. And we're like, okay, well, where's the money going? Where should it be going? And some stuff, it's like, oh man, it's crazy that we're spending money there. No, we want our kids to have this education or we want this or that. And so it's like you said, some of it is a check mark, but then you realize, is this helping me achieve my goals? And as long as you have, like, this goes back to the habits of highly successful people, folks. If you have ultimate clarity on what those goals are, and it doesn't have to be to make $10 million, it can be to have a little 300 square foot piece of property on your favorite lake or something of that sort. Does it support that goal? And if that is the goal, how can you adjust your spending? And so it sounds like that's the tactical nature of it, is just understand your spending. You have a revenue stream now. So where do we go in the tactical nature of it? Is it, okay, figure out what expenses I can drop, figure out what cash flow I can free up to buy assets to increase revenue? Is that kind of the progression you walk people through? Or what's your client journey look like? Let's go through that.
I think that you bring up a good point. So Chad, don't get me wrong. Happiness can be easier to see in a convertible. I would say that what I'm explaining right now is our foundation. So once someone has a foundation, it's a lot easier to build and replicate and duplicate and build up from a base. It's quite hard to mobilize and get the momentum if you're all trying to like do something bigger than you should be and it seems daunting. And so if you're using the tools that I'm talking about, or you're ahead of the tools that I'm talking about, trust me, we'll get there. We need to build up from the bottom and sort of get momentum, because once you know what that looks like, I often say to clients, especially if you're starting out, at 120,000 of income a year is where I see clients actually find a bit of freedom. So if you're making 80, 90, 100, life eats up a lot of that money that, yeah, maybe you save $1,000 a month, but at the end of the year, you got 12,000. You're not really making monumental moves. You make 120, you're able to save 20 maybe. Now all of a sudden, 20 after 3 years becomes 60. You could buy something, you can partner, you could create something and create a business or get a loan. So I think income is often under talked about by advisors. So investing in your skills. What could you do with that 20? If that's all you have, maybe courses, maybe joining you guys, maybe partnering with people to learn the ropes is a way better investment than going out and trying to wait and get your own duplex. So skills and knowledge. And so in our global sphere, if you think about the spending accelerator, it's as simple as imagine there is a machine and out of the back of the machine, there's a conveyor belt. Pretty simple setup. And every month at the start of the month, there's a bucket of money coming out of the machine. So it's coming out and there's little kickers on the conveyor belt as it goes down the line. So the first kicker that bucket is going to tip over a bit and dump some money into is your BAM. So you've got money coming out, dumps a bit of money in BAM. Next bucket, emergency savings. Little kicker, dump some money in there. Next bucket might be your real estate bucket. Next bucket might be your getting good insurance bucket, tips a bit in there. You've got your core investments. So again, this is an investment recommendation, but maybe you pick a balanced fund or an S&P index or whatever you pick. You got some going in there. Maybe you got a high risk bucket. This is your penny stocks or crypto or fill in the blank that you think is high risk. You're putting a little bit in there. So again, you've got different people sort of will make the kicker kick harder and dump more money into. Real estate heavy people that understand that might be a bigger tip into the real estate bucket and a littler tip into the stocks. Some person that doesn't want to deal with tenants or headaches of that thing, they might invest in a real estate company or they might put more into the stock market. And then at the end of the day, if that framework is set up right, hopefully there is money left at the end of the month. And whatever kind of falls off the back of the spending accelerator or the conveyor belt, that money is purposely spent on your lifestyle. So that's nourishing your mind in courses. That's leisure spending with friends. So social connection is a huge thing that I'm an advocate of. Mental health, physical health. Some of my clients are upwards of $1,000 a month in personal training, but in theory, they might have less insurance premiums out the back end because they're healthier. Maybe they're more beat up because they're going too hardcore at CrossFit. I don't know. But you get the idea that the purpose is to specifically dump that in. Now, once that framework is set up, as you add more income, or we deal with a lot of holding companies. So companies have an operating business. They send money up to their holding company. We build this in their holding company because you get clients where they say, hey, I got 400 grand in savings in my holding company, but I'm paralyzed. I don't know what to do. That's a lot of money to put into stocks. So that's a lot of money to put into one piece of real estate. So we try and catch that sooner and say, instead of building that up over time, let's automate. Let's figure this out so that we know, okay, every month you've got 10 grand, 15 grand, 5 grand to work with that you're not going to need. And we're going to just spill a bit into each one. And then out the back end, the purpose of why it's called a spending accelerator is you accelerate your spending because if it's done, you see, okay, well, I could spend an extra $1,000 a month, but I've already checked off all these responsible buckets. And that's where I got one client where we looked at her BAM. She had a $300 a month cable package. She told me in the goals conversation we had with her 10 minutes before that she wanted to be outside and active more. And she was too nervous to pull the trigger on this pair of snowshoes. Okay, so when I asked her, you got $300 a month going to your cable bill, you like TV, you watch sports or NHRA drag racing or what is it? And she goes, no, I hardly ever watch TV. That's just the package I've had for a long time. So in 1 month, we could reduce the cable package down to her internet, highest speed, a reasonable cable package for $150. And within 3 months, she could buy a $450 pair of snowshoes, which is a pretty good pair of snowshoes. So again, back to goals and values and just aligning like where the money is going. So I get away from the spending accelerator, but I think now we've sort of set the framework of, yeah, that's the tactic. And then from there, it just can be multiplied on more income, less income, or in our case, here's how it works. In my world, I have an operating company, a holding company, and we take money out of the operating company and we have to pay personal tax on that. Every dollar you take out of your company, you got to pay personal tax. So we run our personal checking account almost, what are we at? We're at the start of the month. So right now it's higher, but near the end of the month, I might have $300 or $400 in my checking account. If we have a big expenditure, I have to pay for it out of either a Visa, wait for the next month. But we were experiencing, we did 4 NSFs in the first like 5 months of a year, 1 year. And my wife was saying to me, hey, like Serviss, we make too much money to NSF. This is embarrassing. We're paying all these fees. Why? We need to take more money out of the company. And I say, whoa, pay tax. And so what the problem was is we had our second child go into daycare. And all of a sudden that extra cost hitting the checking account was causing us to NSF. And I didn't really account for it. So my accountant sat us down and we all looked at this big spending accelerator. And he said, well, what would happen if you took $1,000 and saved that less? Save $1,000 less into your stock bucket. What happens? And I punched in. I knew where he was going, but it was like very minimal. By the time I'm 55, very minimal change. And the daycare is really only for a year or two. So that, okay, sort of, again, I use the word permission. It's, oh, well, why don't we take $1,000 or $2,000 out? Because we got car seats and we got strollers and all this stuff coming up. And my wife and I can be more at peace. So that optics was very good in a time where it was quite stressful on the money side, when it really wasn't, because in the companies, they were totally fine.
It's a great way to think about it. And I think it's coming down to knowing your numbers and knowing your needs. And that's just an incredible way to think about it. So before we get into the Quattro questions, Dustin, how can the listeners get in touch with you and maybe put together their own spending accelerator?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. So if they go to Serviss Wealth, Servis wealth.com, upper right corner, book a meeting. And beside it is a thing called Get Started. So if you wanted to you can punch in basically a few of your particulars. If you own real estate or some stocks, you can kind of build those buckets in a nice visual thing, and that will come right to me. So when we sit down, I can definitely quickly give you a heads up on maybe some strategy.
And I just realized the name of your company, Serviss Wealth. If you're not using that in marketing, you should be. So that's wonderful. I'm sure you're already all over that.
I need to use it more.
That's fantastic. Well, before we let you go, let's get into a couple of the Quattro questions, shall we?
Sure.
All right. So question number 1, Dustin, what is your superpower in life or business, and how does it serve you well?
I would say it's a lack of getting distracted by noise. I'm maybe say selfish, but at the same time, very focused. So when I'm working on client files and trying to work on the market, the news and the noise, it's just out there. And so my superpower, I would say, is, not succumbing to anxiety of stuff that doesn't concern me.
Folks, I've said it before and I'll say it again. News is out there to create controversy. It is not meant to make you feel good or make you feel secure. So just remember that. Good news doesn't get ratings. So let's flip it around a little bit, Dustin. So what is your biggest failure to date? And it could be life or business again. And what'd you learn from it?
This might be non-typical. I think my biggest failure might be not thinking I have any biggest failures. I think I've learned a lot of lessons. I've tried a lot of things, wasted a lot of money, hopefully maintained all the relationships that I've had. That's important to me. But I don't think there's just a lot of learning out there that a person can do. And hopefully you can use that for the future.
I love that answer. And going to the next question, Dustin. So you also have a podcast out there, and I'd love for you to share what that is and what it's about. It's a place where you provide massive value to your audience. So what is that? Where can we find it? And what's it about?
Sure. So the podcast is called The Picture of Wealth, or TPOW, as we call it. And the premise is basically interviewing clients and contacts that I have and people all around the world who are successful in business already, but yet there's a bit of a twist. They live life just a little bit different, and I try to unpack that twist. I know what the twist is, but trying to get it to come out in story form and getting people just to resonate with there's maybe a different way they could live their life.
That's incredible. And that can be found everywhere podcasts are available, or where do you have it?
Yeah. Spotify, Apple, The Picture of Wealth.
Very good. Very good. And folks, that will be in the show notes. Just scroll right on down and you'll see that link for you. Editors, make sure you grab that. If they don't, tell me in the comments. We'll get some new editors. Anyway, just kidding. Last question. One of the 4 pillars of Quattro, people, property, profits, and philanthropy, taking care of people, comes full circle, is philanthropy. And I love to give our guests an opportunity to share their philanthropic heart on the show. You never know. We have had reports of listeners donating on your behalf. So, what is that for you and where can they find it?
Well, I would say that on the currently top 20 under 40, top 20 over 40 programs in British Columbia or Western Canada is something that's near and dear to my heart. Being a 2-time winner, to try and flip it and now give it back to smaller communities is something that we're doing now. So our community funds are going to support these programs. The current one is Salmon Arm, British Columbia. We're almost all the way through the top 20 over 40. And it really does have a huge impact on the community because a lot of this, especially smaller towns, people not necessarily, they don't want to be recognized, but there just really isn't a platform. In bigger centers where you got your larger US cities, major Canadian cities, these programs have existed for a long time and people have just sort of comfort in being promoted. In smaller centers, they haven't had that. So it seems weird or different, but it's really been a success. The under 40s and now the over 40s. So again, if you want to check that out, it's top 20 in Salmon Arm, British Columbia currently.
Fantastic, Dustin. Thank you for sharing that. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the Real Estate Runway, sharing some of your knowledge and some of the great ideas that you've had to help people realize their dreams. They're not as far away as you might think, folks. Thanks for coming on, and I hope to see you in the future.
Thanks for the invite, Chad.
All right, everyone. This has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway Podcast. Until next time, over and out. All right, Real Estate Runway family. That was a fantastic episode with Dustin Serviss, good friend of mine, Canadian wealth manager out of the western part of Canada. And by the way, if you missed it, he showed a beautiful view of his lake spot on his acreage out there in Canada. Hit us on YouTube at Real Estate Runway Podcast, and you'll see that right there in beautiful HD view. If you enjoyed the episode, we'd love it if you'd leave us that 5-star review and thoughtful comment. Those are the only way to get this show out to people just like you. So thank you in advance for doing that. If you want to visit us on the socials, we're there at Team Quattro Capital, one word, no special characters, or just visit us at thequattroway.com. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at podcast@thequattroway.com if you feel like it, just to say hi or give us a topic request. And if you want to apply to be on the show, please visit us at thequattroway.com/podcast. Until next time, this has been another episode of the Real Estate Runway Podcast. Over and out.
We hope this episode was insightful and brought value to your day. If so, please be awesome and leave us a 5-star review. Find out how Team Quattro can help you at thequattroway.com. Until next time, this is the Real Estate Runway Podcast.